Roger, I'd like to ask for a raise for working in tough conditions. For good engines, for powerful ones, for those that brake really well. Hi, this is Elias here, greeting you from beautiful, sunny and incredibly hot Faenza. As you can see, we were testing the Ducati Desmo 450 MX because that's the official name of Ducati's first motocross bike. What I can say is, first of all, I already had my whole speech prepared, and then the last session came, which changed everything because the guys showed up with a computer. I asked them for a few changes, and I was a bit stunned because until now I never thought the day would come when I'd be in favor of electronics in motocross bikes, or rather that I would appreciate it so much. But then the year 2025 eventually came, and Ducati officially entered the exciting world of motocross and confidently said, "We will show you precisely what kind of advanced electronics we have because we truly love racing. We meticulously make motorcycles specifically to race." And for me, that was actually the most important moment of the whole event because sure, we got a Lambo to drive here, an amazingly prepared, beautiful track with tips from Antoine Mayo and Alessandro Lupino. Lupino's start, riding the bikes, they pampered us to death. But for me, the most important thing was when at the factory, they told us that they don't want to sell as many motorcycles as possible on the market, that they want to be the most desired brand, that they want to produce serial racing motorcycles. Well, to me, that sounds like a recipe for success. If these are really going to be race machines straight out of the box, then I say yes. I'm starting to understand this whole Ducatisti effect, this whole love affair with the brand. Because for me, Ducati has always been something huge, but in reality, it's actually quite a small company, but one that is incredibly driven by passion. And what's great is that they're together. There are mechanics, there are engineers who sit behind the glass from the mechanics. And now imagine a situation where something has been designed. This is supposed to be racing. Everything is supposed to be done quickly, easily, and pleasantly. And if it's not, then a mechanic calls over the engineer from behind his computer and tells him to fix something. And of course, next time the engineer will make sure to do it right. Why did Ducati even get into motocross in the first place? They claimed that they saw the growth of this market, and in Italian roots, Tony Cairoli, a 9-time world champion, has a strong presence, and he actually had a huge influence in the development of this motorcycle. And besides that, they say something very interesting. They want a young motorcyclist, but Ducati looks at it a bit differently. This is a potential customer who will be able to move up to a multistrada, an adventure bike, or other motorcycles. And that's when they'll really be able to reap the cream of the crop. I think it's a great move because it's no secret that the average age of motorcyclists is rising and the motorcycle community is aging. But the motorcycle, Ducati, I'll say it quite objectively and with complete honesty. For me, this is without a doubt the most incredibly beautiful and aesthetically pleasing motorcycle currently available on the entire market right now. So what exactly sets the remarkable Ducati Desmo 450 MX so distinctly apart from its competitors? And what does this desmodromic valve system actually provide? Well, mainly it means that the valves are closed mechanically because a spring alone can't return fast enough in these conditions. And thanks to that, you get a red line at 11,900 RPM. They could actually go even higher, as they claim, but those are the requirements when it comes to the class and the regulations. It allowed for a very flexible engine performance and power delivery. And this motorcycle pulls incredibly smoothly. They call it an endless engine, one that starts delivering power evenly from the lowest revs and just keeps pulling, pulling and pulling very, very far. The gearbox here is definitely different than in the motorcycles we're used to. First and second gear are very long. I was used to riding in second or third gear, but here I had to completely change my riding style. You have to ride in first or second gear and really push those gears. And that's when this motorcycle truly shows its real potential. Personally, I like that it has this kind of character, that the motorcycle wants to be pushed, that you have to give it some kind of like with a two-stroke. Of course, you can ride more flexibly, use higher gears, but it doesn't give you the desired effect. The frame is very original. They switched to aluminum very quickly. They started building the motorcycle really from the center, knowing that the fuel system here had to have the simplest possible line. So once that was agreed upon, one group of engineers began working on the engine while the other group worked on the chassis. They combined their ideas because obviously in the end everything has to work together. This is the frame. Only 11 elements to have as few welds as possible to achieve the stiffness they wanted and to minimize weak points. This motorcycle handles nicely because it's very stable. I really enjoyed riding it, especially when it comes to sitting position, because I would call this motorcycle, in terms of the chassis and ergonomics, a modern generation bike. It forces us to save our strength and let the suspension do its job. On the other hand, when standing up, I personally had trouble finding the position I was looking for because the foot pegs are set quite high. I kind of feel like I'm riding on my toes, which makes my knees bend a bit and it takes a lot of effort. When I remembered to press and hold the position here, it was great, but it didn't come 100% naturally. Brembo, brakes and clutch. I think there's nothing to add here because everyone knows, especially with Galfer discs, that it just works and it works great. The Showa suspension I would point out at the start as the Achilles heel of this motorcycle. At first I was overjoyed because it was the first time I felt good on a stock motorcycle with the stock suspension set up from the beginning. It quickly turned out that even for me it was just a bit too soft. Then came the final stage of testing. We adjusted the front and it was great. The suspension stopped bottoming out on jumps and it stopped bottoming out in corners when standing after jumps. At the front, at the back, you'd probably still need to tweak it a bit, but I was shocked at how just 2 clicks up or down on the stock suspension could make such a difference. But, well, Showa, 49 millimeters at the front. And then the cream of the crop, Dera Creme, which is electronics and knowledge brought over from MotoGP, patented. A really positive surprise. We have 2 riding modes available, but these aren't just 2 maps you switch with a button. There's a green mode and a blue mode. And you program these modes yourself in the Ducati app, but you do need to buy a Wi-Fi module. Apparently the module isn't that expensive either, around 200 euros. And then you can adjust the power delivery from smooth and flexible to, let's say, really sharp. You can also edit engine braking and you can adjust traction control as well. I haven't come across a traction control system that works the way it does in Ducati. Let's talk about. As for my impressions of how this traction control works. At first, on the green map, the standard one, with the stock, unadjusted cutoff, at times I felt like I wasn't riding a Ducati built by the Corse team, but an Opel Corsa, because it was making these weird noises from the intake. The track was very wet and the wheel wanted to slip and the bike was holding back to maintain traction, not letting the engine rev up high and break traction. It was a very strange experience. It was probably faster, but my mind just couldn't handle it, so I felt much better riding on that milder map and without traction control in this mode. I would just call it a romantic girl who wants to spend a pleasant evening with you and take really good care of you. On the other hand, when I switched on the red mode without traction control, it was like a dominatrix came in who wanted to not literally dominate you, and she probably would succeed because your strength would run out quickly as the power became insanely strong. Then turning on traction control even at the weakest setting was like the dominatrix's friend coming in and calming her down a bit just to make sure you didn't get hurt. And that was simply amazing because I had a powerful motorcycle that, despite everything, didn't want to tear me apart. At that moment in this app, I just lost my mind. The track had dried up, there was no more mud, and going uphill, even with higher traction control on the green map, the bike would just gently lift the front wheel and handled like a dream. We actually did the opposite. We lowered the traction control level, but no, we actually increased it, and it was awesome. And it let me hold my line through the corners. It didn't slide out much at all. I think that in the end, it would need to be trimmed down a bit, but it's hard for me to imagine riding without any traction control at all, now that I've experienced its potential. I guess I'm getting old, that's what I think, because I never would have thought I'd say something like that in my life. If I had truly met myself even just this very morning, I would have confidently said there's absolutely no possible way. I will certainly share my comprehensive final thoughts on this particular matter with you at the very end.
5, 4, 3, 4. Now counting the numbers.
Awesome day, awesome motorcycle. Damn, Andre, Ducati really does the job, and apparently there are flat trackers. And I'm left with a huge moral dilemma. Should I be a responsible adult, or should I spend my savings on a Ducati after all? So I hate you, Ducati, for what you've done to me. Bye.